everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a professional artist, clinical hypnotherapist and well-being expert working with those in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions, and moments that could potentially change our lives too. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. This week, on the penultimate episode of the Brave Moment Writers miniseries, we welcome back award-winning executive producer for BBC News and BBC Three's Kim Rowell to talk about her new book, You Are So Much More Than Your Job. After the success of her previous children's book, Townie Spider, Kim has now created a part memoir, part mental health guide on how to navigate a way through challenging life experiences, with exercises designed to focus our attention and awareness on resilience, reframing, and the things that really matter when life throws us a curveball or two. In this episode, we talk about Kim's personal experiences that led her to write the book, what it takes to put pen to paper, getting creative with publishing, and great tips and advice for those that are just beginning on the writer's journey. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to this multi-talented media creative, Kim Rowell. Kim Rowell from the BBC and author of You Are So Much More Than Your Job. Welcome back to the Brave Moments.
Hello.
Hello.
So nice to be back. You're my favourite interviewer. So there we go. Oh. Sweeping statement to start.
I'm such a groupie myself, so, you know, the feeling's mutual, my friend. I'm so excited to have you back on the show today for our Writers mini-series, because I'm looking at your book on Unbound Publishing and I literally can't wait to have my hands on that copy of it. So I'd just like you to start by telling us a little bit of the backstory behind your book, why you chose to write it, what inspired you, and let's take it from there.
I think you can always tell a really good story if you write about what you know, which is what I've done, essentially. It sounds like a very weak answer, but that's it. I think I'd been through some really rocky patches in my life, and I was very aware that I wasn't the only one. And I think that's one of the challenges we face when we're going through those kind of situations is, I'm all on my own in this. No one, where I can't see the wood for the trees. What's the issue? What's the problem? Why is no one helping me? Where's the support? And I wanted to I've always been quite raw and honest and open in my approach to most things. I just wanted to write down on paper, I guess, my own experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hope that it might provide some comfort, I suppose, for anyone else going through similar things. And it's not all doom and gloom at all, in all honesty. It's supposed to be inspirational. It's supposed to help people address some of the perennial issues like imposter syndrome. Where do you get your confidence from? The vulnerability aspect, being a woman in a man's world, all of those kind of things. And at the end of each chapter, I put in some exercises that I've designed specifically because they've helped me through certain scenarios, certain situations. And it's not just about work either, really, because lots of us are challenged so much in our personal lives, particularly since COVID, and we're still living with COVID and all of the ramifications of that. So it felt like a cathartic process, I suppose, for me, almost like therapy, I guess, in a way. But Yeah, and just to put it out there. And that's always a bit of a risk in itself, just to see whether you're on the right wavelength, whether people are going to engage.
I can't wait. I'm absolutely curious, and also feel like I might need this book myself, because last time I spoke to you, we talked about imposter syndrome in particular. And I know that is definitely a facet of the book. I mean, even by the title, you are so much more than your job.
Yeah.
It's something that we always do, isn't it? We always define ourselves by these different titles in life. And I mean, how did that apply to you? Like, did you get to a point in your life where you were telling yourself, I'm so much more than my job?
Yeah, for sure. And no matter how much we love our jobs, they are never going to love us back. And I saw something on LinkedIn just yesterday, I think, where someone had posted a photo of a family image. And it was like, this is quite morbid, if you die tomorrow, there'll be someone else doing your job, in the next month.
Oh, that's freaky to think about.
It is, and it's true. And in all honesty as well, the main bulk of the reason that I did write the book was I'd been made redundant 3 times in 5 years. And at each point, I thought I'd reached my lowest ebb, and you had to find the purpose. You had to find the reason you were getting up in the morning, and why you were getting up in the morning, and what was the reason for you being, which is quite a profound question to ask at all, really. But I think I then found myself establishing my roots really kind of organically outside of the workplace. And I was receiving way more recognition for my philanthropic efforts outside of work. And I still am, to a point. It started to kind of level itself out now, where I'm actually doing what I want to do in the workplace as well. But that wasn't the case for such a long time. And that was because I suppose I got disheartened, because every time I was made redundant, it took me a while to realise it wasn't about me as a person. It was a number or a role, or, that kind of instigator behind why it was happening. And I then had to find, like I was saying just now, what am I going to do with myself? Why am I going to get myself up off the sofa? What is my reason for today? And it changed, obviously, because across those 5 years I became a mother. So towards the end I was getting up for my daughter predominantly, but it's such a huge challenge. But I think a lot of my founding qualities and personality traits have evolved outside of work, and now they're starting to kind of cross-pollinate and go into what I do on a day-to-day. So that's been a really interesting process in itself.
I just think it's incredible. And you talk about resiliency and reframing and things like that, which you must have learned in that space, away from your job and away from those pressures that you put upon yourself. What do you think was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself outside of work at that time?
It's a really interesting question. I suppose there's an awful lot to do with mental health and well-being. And I've never been diagnosed with any kind of mental illness whatsoever. But for sure, there were moments when I was like, what? And I even asked my mum and my husband at points, I was like, what is the reason of me? Like, why am I here? What am I doing? I got to that point, I think. And that was, I know, it's really dark, isn't it? But this kind of then getting out of that and thinking, when you're talking about resilience and reframing, you're like, because I'm going to do this, because I'm going to go and work on this. Like, for example, I think in the 3rd time I was made redundant, I probably mentioned this before, but I had the Woman of the Future award on my desk at work when my boss pulled me over and said he was making me redundant. I was literally like, should I bring the award? But then after that, I was like, we'd done award-winning podcasts at the Telegraph. I'd worked with Bryony Gordon on her podcast series. We'd done a cookery series with Diana Henry. We'd done a Strictly Come Dancing podcast, which had Debbie McGee on it. I'd done a lot of podcasting, as well as current affairs ones as well. So when I was made redundant, the last series of Bryony's, it was called If I Can Do It, that came out in the January after. And I was like, do you know what? I know how to do this. I know how to set up a podcast. I know how to market it. I know how to get it up and running and, functioning running successfully. So I said to the Women of the Future, like, let me speak to your alumni, let me speak to the network. I mean, I'd won the award myself, and I just thought, I mean, they're associated with people like Jess Phillips, the MP, and Cherie Blair, obviously Tony Blair's wife, and Lisa Smazarski from like editor of Stylist magazine, and Nimco Ali, the activist, but also a lot of people that are just blimmin' fantastic in what they're doing. So through STEM or engineering or construction or media and communications. And for some unknown reason, they agreed to let me do it and kind of have free reign. So that was that. And, it's finding, I was excited, I was enthusiastic, but I'd made that, I'd kind of had a little think about a little project, because it's my hobby now. I do it in my spare time. I still do it. And I had the time. I needed something to get my blood pumping. And, every time an episode drops, I'm sure you find that with your own podcast, it's a little bit exciting. Who's going to engage? Like, what conversation will it make? So, yeah, it was finding, obviously that's quite an extreme example, but it was playing to your own strengths, I think, thinking about what is important to me, what do I get a kick out of, what am I really going to enjoy? But I think a lot of things in life boil down to what makes you happy. Like, what really makes you happy, and think about that and take it back to like the bare bones of what even just makes you smile thinking about it. And, there might be something in that. And I think people have been doing that during the pandemic as well, haven't they? Lots of people have just done a complete 180 on their careers and gone off down a completely different avenue.
Oh my goodness, I totally understand that. I mean, this podcast wouldn't be here if it wasn't for asking that same important question. But it's such a weird one, isn't it? Because it seems like a really simple question to ask yourself, but it actually takes a lot of courage, I think, to sit there and go, you know what? I'm not defined by my job. I'm defined now in this space, in this moment, by what makes me happy. And if you can find that, and if you can have trust and faith in that, then like you were saying before we started recording, success breeds success, because your focus isn't on the fear of what you're losing. It's on the faith of what's coming. And and that's why I'm so excited about this book, because I think it's going to help so many people. And we just mentioned the pandemic just then. Why do you think that people need a book like this now, off the back of what you've just said?
I think what we've all been through, whether you've known someone in your direct family, I think we've all known someone who's directly suffered as a result of the pandemic in some way, shape or form. And whether that's someone who's died, or someone who's lost their job or been put on furlough, or, we've all just had to adapt so extremely to a situation that no one could have ever anticipated. And I suppose that's what the book kind of addresses. Life can throw you some humongous curveballs, and yet the thing is, you'll carry on. Like, the world keeps ticking over. Your day continues. Again, I think it was the first redundancy when I was in my early 20s. I went home at the end of the day, and obviously came back, and I was quite emotional about the whole thing because it was a completely new concept to me. And someone said to me, "Oh God, what did you do last night?" And I was like, "I did my washing." It was just like, because life goes on. And I think that's the thing. Like, no matter how disastrous your day is, but how, crap, or like you might have had the worst bit of news possible. It is again about resilience and reframing and thinking when it's possible, because sometimes the trauma is just so much, it consumes you clearly. But, when it's possible, thinking, where can I pick the positives out of this? What did I learn? Where can I go from here? Because one of my most favourite phrases is, "This too shall pass." So the good passes, the bad passes, the irrelevant passes. Life just carries on. Whether it's fantastic, it will stop at some point. If it's moderate, mundane, it will stop at some point. So you've just got to hold on. And I think there's a lot of that in this book, again, through my own lived experiences, but also, again, exercises that hopefully will help people be able to cope and manage and find their own adaptation to what it is that they're going through.
Just listening to you now, I'm getting cathartic about those times in my life where I've felt challenged or I felt like there is no hope, like you just can't get yourself out of it. And knowing that someone like yourself who, you know, fast forward to this moment in time when you've won a multitude of awards for the incredible work that you're doing. And thank goodness for what you're doing as well. It's so precious, not only for what we view on television, but also, you know, from your written word as well. Just writing it now in this moment in your life, has it been cathartic for you to look back on that time? Does it feel like a different person or just a continuation of the story into a more positive place?
Yeah, again, it's a really interesting question. And I do not feel like I'm the 16-year-old girl who was, you know, finishing her GCSE, starting college, trying to find her identity and her feet in the world. I do not feel like that girl anymore. But the kind of, again, the founding qualities and, you know, the things that had real meaning to me, I guess my moral compass, I always kind of hark back to my own moral compass. It was all there. You know, I've had some ups and downs and all else in between, and, you know, probably in all honesty, some near-death experiences. My poor mother, I can't even begin to imagine. But it's just, I didn't really think I had this expectation of my life, but I think there's always been in my mind's eye, like, I want to try my best. And if you don't try at all, then you're never going to get anywhere. You know, it's easy. It's so easy to just sit there and be like, do you know what? Can't be bothered. But if you have that attitude, what are you know, and again, this isn't for everybody. And I know when I speak on this, everyone's like, oh God, she's gone off on one. But, you know, literally, if you just sit there and don't try or don't make any effort, like, what is the point? You know, why are we here? What is the value we're adding? But also, I completely appreciate the value could be in your family connections and how you support your siblings or your parents or what have you. But for me, I think it's always been a little bit more, and I've always wanted to just try my best, but also to pay it forward, because I came from very humble beginnings. Like, my mum was a single parent in North Devon. We had very little when I was growing up. I remember being in one of the first houses I can remember as a child, and we just moved, and I got covered in fleas because we'd been sleeping on the floor, and like flea bites, sorry, and because we'd been sleeping on the floor and things like that. But that kind of hardship, though, like my mum and my sister and I and my stepfather now, you know, we are a million miles away from that. And people do look at me now, and with an element, I don't know whether it's my own kind of subconscious, like, oh God, but I feel like they judge me for everything that I have and everything that I have achieved and all of that kind of thing. But for me, I've got the battle scars, you know, and if you don't know me as a person, then fine. From the outside looking in, you might think, oh, that looks great. Like, she's got a nice life. But it means more to me because I've put that effort in, and it means more because I've earned my stripes. And it's literally, I've had some massive failures along the way, but they've literally just made me stronger.
So when people are reading this book and hearing what you've just said, what do you hope people will learn about you as a person?
There's a sense of vulnerability to it, for sure, because whenever you put out an opinion, or, you know, you document an experience, or you talk about something that's very personal to you, you open yourself up for criticism. Or on the flip side of that, you also then bizarrely become some kind of spokesperson on the subject, whether it's like mental health or what have you. And then people start asking you for more, you know, input into what their own personal queries may be. So I suppose there's a nervousness around that in a sense. But I don't know, I think I'm just looking forward to having people read it, and it'd be great to get some feedback, I guess, because that's the thing, isn't it? When you've been working on a project and you think you've poured your heart and soul into it, which is what I've definitely done with this, I would now just love to see how it's received, and if it does help people, that would be brilliant. I think that's my main intention, is that I really hope, I know when I read similar kind of books, you might not like enjoy all of it. I'm hoping that people do, but also you might just get one little gem or a tidbit that you think, yeah, that really rings true, and then you can run with it in your own life. I really hope it's that kind of sentiment that people get out of it.
I'm sure they will. I mean, just listening to you talk is inspiring, let alone what you've written down.
You're very kind.
So coming to the writing process of this all, I mean, what did you find particularly challenging? Can you remember sitting in front of your screen thinking, okay, I've got to write this idea down. Where do you even start?
I guess I approached it in a way that isn't probably what most writers would recommend, but I did it when I had the time available, but I kept persisting. I kept trying to chip away at it because I wanted to get it done. Yeah. I wanted to kind of make some tangible progress, I guess. And, I was like, right, I'll write a chapter and I'll write it on this. And clearly, I mean, I think we'll come round to tips later, but it's good to have a framework. You're like, I'm going to write, these are going to maybe be my chapter headings, and I'm going to write on this. So it was just applying yourself and finding the time and sitting down and doing it. Even if you just dedicated an hour to it, it's that kind of level of commitment to get anything done, I think, generally when it comes to writing or project-based or what have you. You have to chip away at it, otherwise you're never going to get anywhere. But also, don't self-edit before you've actually written anything. Like, literally, I found it a lot easier to pour my heart out like a big stream of consciousness, because then I can now go back and edit it and think, well, that doesn't quite make sense, or I've already said that, like, oh god, crikey, that doesn't really flow, or what have you. But it's an interesting process, and I'm sure lots of people approach it differently, but I think predominantly it's just getting it down and getting it out, and then revisiting it and thinking, does that structure match the last structure? Does it flow? Those kind of things that we all look to when we're reading. Because I know, for example, when I read, if I'm on a train, I kind of want chapters that I can read in about 20 minutes, half an hour, because then I'll get off the train. Stuff like that. You've got to think about, where are people going to read this? How can I make it adaptable again to that situation? So if you can read for 20 minutes and then stop at the end of a chapter, I think that's quite helpful. So things like that. Yeah, so helpful. And weirdly, this is terrible, but I do judge a book by its chapter length. Like, if I know that's so bad, isn't it? I'll be reading a chapter and halfway through, I'll sort of flit to the end of the chapter just to see how long it is and how many pages I can hold in my fingertips. If it's too long, I'm not going to read it. I'm with you. Do you reckon everyone does that? Because I 100% do that. I'm like, what am I investing in here? How long have we got? I'm so the same.
Listeners, drop us some comments.
We'll
do a poll. That's really, really interesting. So, coming into that process, obviously having to be disciplined and self-disciplined, which is really, really hard for creative people, especially if you're a bit of a magpie and you're like, oh, I've got to do this and I want to do that, blah, blah. What do you wish someone had told you before you began?
That it's a marathon and not a sprint. I think that's really, really important. Like, you might have the best idea, but there are stages to the process, and that you have to be willing to invest in it, to really put aside some time to make this work and to make it come to fruition. And that it's like more of a long haul flight than a mini break, to be honest. But I think it's all about just having a great idea and running with it and just thinking, you know what, let's just see what I can do with this. And it might even be that you end up finishing the idea so it's more like an article or an essay or what have you. But then if you write quite a few essays, you can stick those all together. And so there's different approaches and there's different ways of doing it, but just get started, just do it and see where it takes you.
It's so funny because every single writer on the Writers Mini-series has said exactly the same thing. If you want to be a writer, write!
Yeah,
just write.
Literally just do it. I remember I had an art teacher when I was at secondary school, and I always remember she was Miss Inca. She was very small, so we called her Dinky Inky. But she was brilliant. She was quite fierce. But anyway, so when lots of people would say, "Oh, I don't know where to start," when we were doing drawings or pictures or anything really, and she would literally come over and take the pencil and just make a mark, and she's like, "Right, you've started now. Keep going." And that just stayed with me because I thought that's brilliant. That's just pure genius.
I love that. I'm going to put that in my journal later because I often, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about writer's block and stuff later. So we might come back to that. But that's so important because, you talk about sort of like persistence versus resistance and all that kind of stuff. If I've got something to do and I'm really near a deadline, I will leave it for as long as possible before that deadline. I'm really bad at self-discipline. So, hearing something like that where, you don't have to be scared of the blank page. If you just make that mark, that's a really helpful tip. Like I've taken that on board. So
just
thanks, Dinky Inky.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, Dinky Inky, legend that she is.
So what has the writing process taught you about yourself?
What I learned about myself is I do have a lot to share, and maybe it's just something that comes with age, where you look back and think. I think also in the work that I do now at the BBC, I manage a team of young people, and I've never really felt so old in my life because
I feel you, sister.
I just don't even get me started on TikTok and stuff like that. But also that's a benefit now. I feel like I actually have a voice of authority in a sense, and I'm in my late 30s, and I'm hoping that's not that old, but I do feel that particularly when it comes to career and some real lived experiences and some bizarre different directions that I've headed off in at points, I actually feel like I have something really important to say. And again, the intention being that people can learn from it and maybe just take the advice, don't have to heed it, but run with it and just use it as a tool to help themselves going through whatever it is that they might be facing in their own lives. It's more, I really want to try and pay it forward with this, just helping other people.
I think that's the difference though, isn't it? When you're writing from an authenticity to when you're writing to make money, for instance. So, we talked a little bit about being the right age to write or whatever. And I do feel like sometimes with celebrity culture, they are made to write their biography super early because they happen to be fashionable at that point in time. But, equally, you could be 25 and had an incredible life experience, taking someone like Malala or Greta Thunberg or something and be ready to write that thing. So like you're saying, as long as you're in the right headspace, as long as it's something that serves others almost, then it's it's just bigger than you, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I genuinely could not agree more. And the examples you've given are perfect, because they just literally, both of those examples are a guiding light to everybody who's interested, obviously, within the fields that they operate within. But like if you have something, a story to tell, a lesson to be learned, some kind of guidance or advice or whatever your motive may be. And I get frustrated when you see the next influencer or celebrity being offered a book deal, because you just think
you've worked so hard to get to yours.
yeah, quite. But you know why, don't you? Because they have 1 million followers on Instagram and things like that. You can completely, and it's a money-making exercise, which you'd be really stupid to not acknowledge. And we all I buy into it, to be perfectly honest. But it's just, it's getting what you want out of it. And everyone is so different. Society is so diverse. It would be really ignorant not to make those kind of options available in all the different genres and what have you within the literary world.
Which brings me nicely on to some top tips for writers, please, Kim Rowell.
Well, one of my overarching bits of advice for life generally is just be kind to yourself. So however that plays out, whether you have the time, you don't have the time, if you've not done it for a couple of days, don't chastise yourself. You can do it. There will be time to do it. But also, like I was saying, just get it out. Just literally splurge it down, and you can come back and review it. And if it's a load of nonsense, fine. But at least it's down there and you've got somewhere to start. So be kind to that process, I suppose. Don't be too hard on yourself, because it will just become a very bizarre process if you work like that. And also, I think one of the biggest things is do your research. Where do you fit in the market? who are the other kind of main protagonists who's writing in that space? What have they written? Do you like it? Does that work for you? Like, you know, if you're finding your own voice, how do you stand out within that field? I say this about podcasting as well. Like, I think last year there was something like 800% more podcasts or something bonkers. I was like, wow, that number is just insane in itself. But it's the same point though. Like, if there is a saturated market, what is going to make you shine through, really? So it's that, isn't it? It's kind of just having a mind's eye to where you're going to fit or where you would like to fit and what that involves. But also, again, really important to any kind of writing, like fiction and non-fiction, is do your research, kind of base it on things that you know are statistically interesting, or, you know, even if it's like a crime or a thriller novel or what have you, maybe just look at some of the big cases and, again, indulge in all the other different mediums that are available. So whether it's radio, television, film, what have you, really immerse yourself in what it is that you're trying to do or write about, and get a really strong grasp of how that works and how it plays out and all the different machinations of that world, really, because there will already be big fan bases in all of these different genres, and ultimately that's what you're tailoring your work to. But also, just try out a few different things. If you fancy going a bit random or a bit bizarre or a bit weird or off the wall, then do it. You know, this is your opportunity to really give yourself a voice and an identity within this kind of space. So yeah, just assert yourself, really.
Yes, Kim, I'm punching the air with my fist right now. So I want to talk to you a little bit about writer's block, because it's something that I think probably plays into my fear of starting things, which is that resistance that it's going to fail or something like that. I mean, do you believe in it? Have you ever suffered from it? What do you think it is, and how would you approach it personally?
I think with any kind of creativity, and I was talking about earlier, my art teacher, sometimes you think, where do I even start with this? Where do I go to? What's my motivation? You know, that's quite theatrical, but
jazz hands.
Yeah, quite. But it is that to a point. I think the things that have helped me when it comes to writer's block is taking a walk or doing some exercise, or just doing something completely unconnected to that process. So some of my most brilliant ideas come when I'm having a shower in the morning and things like that. But also like randomly in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and think, oh, that's a good line, or something like that. So I have a notebook, which is also really helpful if you can't sleep for another reason. If you've got lots of things on your mind, I always find it really useful to like write it down, and you can literally close the book on it until the next day. But I think, again, it applies to writing. You know, if inspiration comes to you in really random places, either make a note on your phone or wherever you can like physically write it down. Just try and keep hold of all of the ideas and keep them close to you. And then when you do sit down, hopefully then, if you're not massively inspired that day, that will give you a point to start at, or a jumping off point. So I think things like that I've always found quite helpful when it comes to trying to overcome and mitigate when you don't feel like it's there, that it's not forthcoming.
That's really, really interesting. And I'm thinking about you now, because obviously you've written Townie Spider before this, and you've written quite a few things. And I'm thinking about those people now that might be listening that have already written their first book, and they're trying to find that inspiration and motivation to start another book, because the energy involved must be humongous. Just the idea of another book must be quite overwhelming. How did you make yourself sit down and start? Can you remember where you were? What were you thinking? What did you do to start that second book?
Yeah, well, if I take it back to like Townie Spider in the first instance, I actually wrote that on my commute, because I work in London and I live in Bicester. So it takes about 50 minutes on the train. So I used to write it on the train, just because I found it, again, maybe more of a cathartic process. And there is an element of finding the time, specifically with this book, You're So Much More Than Your Job. I I knew I was going to have like a longer Christmas break last year, and I definitely had in my mind was like, well, you know, at least half of that I'm going to make sure I do 2 or 3 hours a day writing. And again, you know, trying to overcome things like writer's block, which I definitely had at points during that whole time period. It was just knowing or kind of committing myself to do that. Was like, well, I'm going to do that. I've said I'm going to do that. It's being quite disciplined, I think is the word, you know, literally sitting down and doing it and making sure that you can do it. And I suppose it's like with anything that you ask anybody who's got quite an involved hobby or something that you know takes a lot of time, when you ask them how they do it or how they find the time, it's you have to make the time. You know, that's the issue, isn't it? And it's like, oh, I wish it was that easy, but we can all do it. It's how we prioritize. And you know, so maybe I've got a pile of ironing I've not done, and that's a really bad example, but you know, you probably do. You know, I've always said that women can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. So
ain't that the truth?
So it's literally, I find it prioritizing. You know, literally, I'm going to focus on that, which means I probably won't be so much focused on that, and I'm going to feel bad about it, but I can let it go. It's not going anywhere. You know, it's literally organizing your time. You have to be quite efficient, and you do have to be disciplined about the whole thing. Well, that's what I found anyway.
I think that's great advice. And it's something actually, like, you know, from a clinical perspective, when people say, oh, I don't have time to, I don't know, start my project, or don't have time to lose weight or whatever, you can always find that time, even if it's the 3 minutes that the kettle would boil or the 10 minutes you'd spend on social media. You can find it if you want it enough, can't you?
Of course you can. Also, I remember my mum, oh, she's going to love me for saying this. She was quite overweight at one point. She was really quite large, and she was getting really upset about being quite a big size. And I remember vividly saying to her, we were in the car on a car journey, I was like, you are the only person that can do this. You've got to want to do this. As soon as it becomes your priority and your focus, I know you can do this. And I think that maybe that worked, because it was the kick up the bum she needed, and she's now the same size as me, which is like a 12, 14. So like, you know, so it worked, you know, and I think it's that you have to be ready. You personally have to be in the right space to want to make it happen. Yes, that was a mic drop moment. I was like, yay! I wanted a whole round of applause from an auditorium there. Okay, so coming back to your book, what is your favourite chapter? Why did you like writing it? And yeah, tell us all about it. My favourite chapter is actually on how you wrangle and deal with social media and criticism and the bizarre relationship that we all have with just putting the best versions of ourselves out there without actually any kind of recompense for how that might affect other people. And I think it's a huge, huge, huge issue. And obviously we have it now in all ways, shapes and forms, particularly, you know, even with like Love Island, with, you know, the amounts of people that get death threats and, you know, some of the contestants and all of that kind of thing. And it's just, there needs to be more accountability in that space. And writing about that, I found it really enjoyable is the wrong word, but like just really useful, because I was acknowledging that I'd done it myself, but also why I'd done it and how I then tried to be more reflective of how I was actually feeling. But then also people don't always want to hear the negativity. Like as an example, a good friend of mine was diagnosed with breast cancer and people didn't know what to say. They literally didn't have the words, so they didn't say anything. And it's like, well, is that right? Like, if you don't know what to say, surely you should just, I think in my experience, you should say something. Because then she was saying when she was coming through the other side of it and she posted that she was cancer-free and what have you, then everyone was like, yay, well done. You know, the positivity got a round of applause, whereas the jeopardy and the I don't know if she's going to make it, everyone was like, oh, that was unnerving, that unsettled us, and it was uncomfortable. And that's the kind of landscape social media is, and it's how we navigate that and make it more, it's taking away the stigma, like things like mental health again. You take away the stigma, you normalize the conversation, and it becomes, more familiar, easier to talk about, never easy, but, it helps people to express themselves and say things they might have been harboring for a really long time.
It's so important how we treat other people, because they're on the screen, aren't they? So we're not seeing their reactions. We're not seeing their facial reactions. We're not engaging with them in that really emotive way that we have sympathy with that person. That seems to be missing from social media. So I'm very, very excited about that chapter, Kim. Very, very important. Will you read us a little extract?
Yeah, I can read you a bit of that very, very one.
Please, that'd be great.
Okay, all right. Negativity, criticism, and more social media. Bear with me, we might be here a while. In general, I've found that the rules to follow when it comes to the remarkable beast that we know as social media, if the person you're following doesn't make you happy, feel inspired, or want a slice of what they're having, then unfollow them. It's just a click, and that's how you got there in the first place. The best people to follow are those who are genuine, those just as prone to post a photo of themselves in a privileged position, i.e. at an enviable party, event, location, etc., as they are to post a selfie of themselves with a takeaway in their pyjamas, without makeup, and severely unfiltered. These people are our kindred spirits, or at least I know they're mine. It's true to say that I haven't always offered an open and honest reflection of my own life on social media. I will happily laud my achievements, but as alluded to earlier, not been quite as truthful when it comes to the stuff that is harder to talk about. I therefore made a point when I was offered a job and started to see the light at the end of the tunnel towards the end of my third redundancy of posting on all my social media platforms, including LinkedIn, a photo of me leaving my last place of work, a very stark photo of me cuddled up on the sofa, close to tears, midway through my redundancy, and then a cheerier offering outside my new workplace. It's true that I caught myself before I hit post, considering what the reception might be. It's also like being bereaved. You never know quite what to say in an awkward situation, but I strongly believe that it's better to say something than nothing at all. Check the post for yourselves. They're all public and generally received a pretty warm reception. When it comes to negativity and criticism generally, I'm certain we've all found ourselves in situations or part of a conversation that leads itself into the negative, or worse still, be on the receiving end of unnecessary and undeserved thoughts, actions, or words. Personally, I've had projects shot down in flames, ideas literally ripped up in front of me, or made to justify my reasoning behind specific decisions and choices when I've neither the energy, enthusiasm, or ability to care anymore. We've all been there, and sadly, I'm fairly confident that I'll be there again. Lip service is not something I would encourage anyone to cultivate, but as and when you do find yourself in one of those particular moments, please do always remember that the negativity, criticism, and reasoning behind it all says an awful lot more about the motivations and interests of the person dishing it out than it has anything to do with you.
Oh, that's just wonderful. I love it. And it's something that I can relate to. It's something that I know all my friends can relate to too. So thank you for writing that book. You'll have to tell us where we can all find it later.
Yes.
What are you particularly proud of in yourself in regards to your book? How have you changed as a person now that you're on the other side of writing it?
Yeah, it literally feels, I'm sure most other authors have probably said something similar, like it's a part of you. You feel that you probably carried it around as some kind of bizarre baggage, whether it's emotional or creative or idealistic or whatever. You probably carried it around for a really long time, and it will always be like your little baby to a point. And it's quite timely, I think. It probably is related very much to the here and now, but also just an element of this is how we can all cope with it. This is very much, as much as it is of the moment, these are kind of perennial issues that are just going to keep springing up. And that women in particular, so I suppose this is much more focused towards women than any other sex, but I do appreciate things like imposter syndrome and confidence, having spoken to my own husband, are things that just apply to universally. But it's nice to have it. it's nice to have finished it, I suppose, in the first instance, and it's nice to be like ready to unleash it into the world and onto the world, which sometimes is how I feel a little bit about my daughter. So I think so maybe that says more about my parenting skills than my book writing. But yeah.
Oh my goodness, a mini Kim in the world. I can't wait. I just can't wait to see what she does. You've decided to go with Unbound Publishing this time.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about them and why it was important for you to take this route.
Yeah, I think a lot of the routes to market for me felt that they were too, like laser focused, I suppose, on what they were looking for, which again is useful. When earlier I was saying you need to do your research and make sure you know what you're talking about. But a lot of the commissioners and publishers I approached already maybe were too specific about exactly what it was they were looking for, which I felt a little bit limiting. But Unbound is a version of crowdfunding, but they've published the likes of Jeffrey Archer and Jim Moore, who's part of Vic and Bob, the comedians? I think it is. But so they've had some really high profile, and they have an awful lot of other authors who are part of their website and what they're doing. And I thought that was encouraging, but also it felt like I had more freedom. You know, I could work with them. There was still an approach whereby they would support you and help you navigate your way through the whole process, and you still have people edit your book. It still gets put into bookshops when it's funded, and it's the same route to market, arguably. It's just that you have to get people to buy into it, which I think is actually a really nice way of doing it. I know some people that have been published with other more high profile ones like Penguin and Bloomsbury and things like that. And if there's no marketing budget behind it, you can release your book and then never hear about it again because there's no amplification of it in the normal marketing avenues. So this feels like you've already... Maybe it's a reverse kind of way of doing, like coming at it, because you have already got the interest, you've already created a noise, and then ta-da, there it is. So, so hopefully that's the way that it'll play out. But it's been really fun, and I've enjoyed the experience so far in working with them, and it's completely different. My children's book, Tiny Spider, was with a different publisher, obviously just because children's publishing is a whole different ballgame. But it's been a different experience, but like really enjoyable. And there was, like I said, there are so many authors that are using this method to get their books out there now. And a lot of them are quite mainstream.
Oh my God, I tell you what, like just from your book being on there, and you were saying about it being a bit like crowdfunding in the fact that people can become like sort of patrons of your book, etc.
Yeah.
It's exciting to be a patron to a book because you get to watch the progress, but also you get the exciting emails saying, oh, it's nearly out or whatever. But like you were saying, I didn't even know Unbound Publishing existed before, we spoke last time. And I found that one of my other favourite authors, Jackie Morris, is releasing a book on Unbound. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the future of publishing to me, because
I think so.
And it's a way for you as a reader to support your favourite authors in a really authentic and independent way. It's great.
It's a great indication as well for the publishers as to how it's going to fly. Because again, when you do it through the traditional routes and ways of coming to market, you don't really know, because obviously someone, like we were saying earlier, might have a big following, or, this is quite a niche subject matter. They're talking about astronauts in space or whatever, So you think like it's going to work, it's going to sell, and you invest in it on that premise, but you don't actually know. But like you say, if you come at it the way that Unbound do it, you get people to invest and support you and almost come on the journey with you, which I think is a much nicer way of doing it for me. But
absolutely. And also, knowing that at the end of the day, like as a reader again, your name is going to be in the back of your favourite author's book. It's really
cool,
exciting.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a few of the things that you have on offer through Unbound if people decide to support your work.
Yeah, so you put up incentives. So as I was saying earlier, I've done a lot of podcasting in my career in the work that I've done previously. So I've got a podcasting for beginners course, so you can have a one-to-one session with me on how to get started and how to hone your idea, technical stuff, a bit on the promotional side. I also, one of the things I'm really excited about is a virtual evening that I'm going to host with,
yes!
I think this is the one that you've kind of...
I'm signed up for it. I can't
so
wait.
Yes. It's with Anna Williamson and Matt Johnson. So Anna Williamson, she's on, I think it's called Celebs Go Dating, the E4 show.
Mm-hmm.
So she's done so much with mental health. I think she's an ambassador for Young Minds, the charity too. I've known her for a really long time. We used to work at GMTV together, and we used to do the dodgy competition. Not dodgy, they're not dodgy. We used to do the competitions together. We actually once went round Nemesis 8 times together.
Oh my God.
I know, because she had to do a link, and her microphone flew off on the second time. It was actually painful. So we know each other quite well. And Matt Johnson, who he used to be on This Morning. He used to run the hub on This Morning. He's a lovely, lovely Welsh guy. He's very easy on the eye, I think I'm allowed to say. But he actually appeared very kindly at Kindfest last year, which was the world's first virtual kindness festival that I was one of the founding people of. And he came on there, he spoke with Brian E. Gordon at the time, but he is so lovely. And he's had some really, really big struggles himself in the kind of mental health space. And so Matt and Anna were doing a virtual evening. That's one of the things that you can pledge for, which I'm really, really excited about. I've done a lot of mentoring in my career as well. So media career mentoring's on there. Obviously you can just buy the book if you want to just buy the book. And I convinced my mother-in-law to buy a tote bag. There's also a tote bag on there. So thanks, Meg. Thanks.
Shout out, Meg.
Yay!
That's fantastic. And I'm just so excited for the rest of your journey, for when the book comes out and, it's in our hands. I mean, how are things progressing? Do you have kind of like a rough date that it might be hitting the shelves?
Yeah, it'll be this year, all things going well. I've got a couple of big sponsors on board. And
congratulations.
Literally very close to signing on the dotted line. So hopefully as soon as that goes through, it shouldn't be too much longer, but I hope this year. So if you want a copy of the book, get in there quick, and hopefully it'll all be, obviously they need to take my manuscript and do the editing side and all the kind of publication side of things too. But I've got everything crossed that it'll be by Christmas. Wouldn't that be a nice Christmas present?
It would be a wonderful Christmas present, and I can't wait. I'll have 5, please. Thanks. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast. Where do you see yourself going next with your writing, and have you even begun to think about a new book yet?
I'd like to finish off Townie Spider, because Townie Spider was going places at the end of his little book. So, and he's never gone on anywhere else since then. So I have written other stories for Townie Spider. They were based on the premise of the 7 deadly sins. So like sloth, greed, gluttony, pride, lust, but they're aimed at preschool children. So clearly it's not that dark. But yeah, they were the general concepts behind it. And they're all farmyard animals. The idea of Townie Spider is that he travels in the wing mirror of a car. He finds himself on a farm. He's all out of sorts and lonely. He makes friends with the farmyard animals. And it was to bring kindness and, themes of friendship and mental health to really young children, because obviously I have a daughter myself and it's dedicated to her. But so I've written more of those. So I'd like to try, I need to work with my animator to, obviously the very important part of any children's book are the pictures. So so I hope to do that. I think when it comes to this kind of thing, I'm not sure I have an awful lot more to say. There are things that have happened since I've finished the manuscript, and I'm like, oh, should I have put that in there? And I haven't. I've kind of purposefully held back. So I'm not sure whether that's just because I've got more in me, or whether I'm like, maybe I need to draw a line. I've probably told everybody way more than they need to know about me, or ever wanted to know about me. So there we are.
Never, Kim Rowell. My final question for you really is, what has been your bravest moment in your writing career so far?
just trying in the first place. You feel so vulnerable. And so, like I was saying earlier, you don't know how it's going to be received, and you probably will get some random comments and we always focus on the one nasty comment, don't we? We don't look at all the love. We always think, oh, that guy just said he thought it was crap, But so yeah, I think that was brave in itself. And I'm intrigued to see how it's received and what kind of comments I get from it. That feels to me, because it is so literally pretty much every page has got a little bit of like my blood, sweat and tears on it, which again, I don't know if that's how that's going to go down, whether that's too much and whether it might not sit well with people. But you can't please all the people all the time. So I'd rather have taken the chance of doing it than not have done it at all.
I really love that. And, just what you were saying before, reading from your chapter 2, I think the world is craving authenticity and openness and vulnerability right now. And it sounds like all of that is within the pages of your book. So I think, from my perspective, that's one of the reasons why I just can't wait to read it, because to know that someone like yourself who, again, like you said, like on social media, people can see all of your awards. They see a life that maybe they aspire to themselves, but to know that you're human underneath it all and having to deal with that with your emotions and with your physicality and just your spirituality as well, it's wonderful, Kim, and I genuinely, I can't wait. Will you leave us with a quote from your book?
I certainly will. This is one of my favourite. You're not missing out. Everything happens for a reason. Your time will come. It might not be this party, event, interview, opportunity, but there is absolutely no reason to feel like the reason you're not there hinges on your future happiness.
Solitary cat, here it comes. Hey! Thank you so much, Kim Rowell. It's been so wonderful to have you back. For those people that want to follow your work and obviously come and be a patron of your book, where can they find you? What are your social handles?
Well, the most important one is the book itself is on Unbound Publishing. It's unbound.com/Kim Rowell, or if you go to Unbound, the website, so unbound.com, and search Kim Rowell, which is Rowell, like Simon Cowell, but with an R. I know. Then, anyway. And a little part of me genuinely dies every time I say that. And then my social handles are at Kim Rowell TV. So yeah, please come and engage and send me a message. I love a chat, obviously. So let's chat.
Thank you, Kim. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Kat. It's always such a pleasure.
I always like to draw on Kim's infinite wisdom after our conversations. Her willingness to be vulnerable, her resilience and zest for life, no matter where she is in it, are astounding. And I just know that Kim's book will be a huge reflection of all that she has accomplished emotionally. Kim mentions the advice, "This too shall pass," as one of her guiding lights to recognize that life is made up of moments, good and bad, and none of them will last forever. So relying on a moral compass as opposed to an instant emotional reaction is far more productive and conducive to positive change. Whether you've just been made redundant or beginning your first book, try not to focus on the fear of what you may have lost or be sacrificing, but instead have faith in what is to come. What can these moments reveal to you about yourself? What makes you truly happy? And is this a blessing in disguise? When it comes to procrastination or writer's block, Kim reminds us of a conversation that she had with her mum. As soon as you make whatever you're working on a priority, that's when things will change. You have to be ready and willing to make the journey within in order to get something out. This applies to everything, right? As soon as you make your writing, relationship, finances, health, or anything your priority, your brain shifts its focus to find opportunity for you. With that in mind, Kim reminds us that writing is not a sprint, but a marathon. You've got to be in it for the long game. And be kind to yourself during the process. Forgive yourself if you don't quite meet your daily goals and keep going regardless. Remember, the more you put in, the more you get out. Literally. Start by just making a mark on the paper. That page can be very daunting when it's blankly staring you in the face. So make a mark. Write your name, date, intention, synopsis, ideas, whatever you like. Just get into the habit of writing something, anything, every day. With that in mind, here are your writing exercises for today. We are going to write something absurd and wacky. Don't be nervous. This isn't outside of your comfort zone and you can't get it wrong. There are no rules to this game, and you want to set a timer for 5 minutes. Although if you're having fun, continue for as long as you like. Think of a random word and write it down. Then write down a second word, which has to be completely unconnected to the first. The game is not to create a valid sentence, but just to play with words in the mind or mouth, or even the ones you like the feel of when you're writing them with a pen. When you have around 16 words, the fun really begins. Cut the words up into squares and rearrange them into a crazy postmodernist poem. Remember, the aim here isn't to get things right, but simply to let the imagination have fun. Our frontal cortex loves to create, and setting ourselves a game such as this gets those creative juices flowing. Here is my example of what I created earlier. Green tea, shadow box. Nursing dogs on rye bread roses. Breathe sunshine on hat's corner. I actually think it sounds rather beautiful. The next exercise is the 3-word generator game. I usually grab a dictionary or open a magazine 3 times on 3 different pages and pull 3 words out from it. So today you have safety, beggar, and horse. You have to use one of those words in your first sentence. Then write as fast as you can for 5 minutes. The other 2 words have to appear in your first paragraph. Don't self-edit, just let it all flow. Afterwards, see what you've written. I find I am always pleasantly surprised at how articulate I can be when there is a time limit involved. And again, those 5 minutes will fly if you allow your imagination the freedom to flow with no filter. Finally, if you're sat in blank page paralysis, close your eyes and just type. Make those marks. When you open your eyes and see the gobbledygook you've created, it may help you to realise that what you're attempting to do is actually kind of fun and a little weird. I mean, you don't see any other species trying to write, do you? As our wise Mary Poppins once said, find the fun and snap, the job's a game. And she would pull whole lampposts out of her bag of tricks. So get comfy with play, my friends, and you will never work another day in your life. As Mark Manson once said, at some point, most of us reach a place where we are afraid to fail, where we instinctively avoid failure and stick only to what is placed in front of us, or only what we are already good at. This confines and stifles us. We can be truly successful only at something we are willing to fail at. If we're unwilling to fail, then we are unwilling to succeed. So get comfortable with failure, and each time, fail a little better, until one day you'll look back and realise that those moments were your bravest, and you wouldn't be where you are today without them. Seek opportunity, my friends, and opportunity you will find. Next week, on our final episode in the Writers mini-series, we speak to TV, radio, magazine and newspaper dating writer of the year, Kate Taylor. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review on Apple Podcasts, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share the show with your friends by following us at the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or on Twitter at Moment Brave, or just follow the Linktree on all of our social media platforms. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with your own stories, and remember, your brave moment starts now.